The Galactic Council chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive ring of metal and crystal that had witnessed 10,000 years of peace. Inside its halls, representatives from 200 species debated matters of trade, territory, and law. The Council had brought order to chaos, united warring civilizations, and created the longest period of galactic stability in recorded history. Their power came from one simple truth. They had the biggest guns, the strongest shields, and the most intimidating warships anyone had ever seen. Humanity had joined this ancient institution only 50 years ago. Their arrival had caused quite a stir at first. The humans were strange creatures, bipedal and relatively weak compared to most spacefaring species. They had no natural armor, no venomous fangs, no ability to survive in vacuum even for a few seconds. Their technology was primitive by Council standards. Their faster-than-light drives were slow and inefficient. Their weapons were laughably outdated. Their largest warship was smaller than a Crithian cargo hauler. The Council had granted humanity probationary membership status. It was a polite way of saying the humans were allowed to sit at the table, but nobody had to listen to them. Humans could trade on minor routes, establish small colonies in unwanted sectors, and generally make themselves useful in small ways. They were creative, adaptable, and surprisingly good at solving problems. But militarily, they were a joke. Everyone knew it. Even humanity's few allies in the Council privately admitted the humans would be crushed in any real conflict. Earth's military presence in the galaxy reflected this reality. 20 cruisers patrolled human space, vessels that were outdated by Council standards but represented the best humanity could build. A handful of orbital defense stations protected their homeworld and major colonies. Their total military spending was a fraction of what other species allocated to defense. Human diplomats constantly advocated for peaceful solutions, for dialogue over warfare, for mercy toward conquered species. The galaxy found it amusing and slightly pathetic. Ambassador Chen Wei represented humanity in the Council chambers. She was a patient woman who had spent 30 years navigating the complex politics of galactic diplomacy. She had learned to smile when other ambassadors made jokes about human weakness. She had learned to push for incremental changes rather than dramatic reforms. She had learned that sometimes the best strategy was to be underestimated. The Crithian Empire was one of the Council's founding members. They were massive creatures, each one standing nearly 3 meters tall with armored exoskeletons that could deflect most small arms fire. Their civilization had conquered 40 star systems before joining the Council, and they had never truly abandoned their imperial ambitions. The Crithians maintained the largest military fleet in the Council, a not-so-subtle reminder of their power. Their dreadnoughts were legendary, massive vessels bristling with plasma cannons and protected by shields that could withstand nuclear detonations. For years, the Crithians had been eyeing human territory in the Outer Rim. The colonies there were small but productive, and they sat on valuable trade routes. Crithian merchants complained that humans were taking business that rightfully belonged to the Empire. Crithian military officers grumbled that such weak creatures shouldn't be allowed to control strategic locations. The complaints grew louder each year. Then came the formal demand. Crithian Ambassador Vector stood before the Council and declared that humanity must cede control of 12 colony worlds to the Empire. The demand was backed by ancient territorial claims that were dubious at best. When Ambassador Chen requested time to negotiate, Vector laughed, a sound like grinding stones. "Negotiation is for equals," he said. "You will comply or face consequences." Chen Wei kept her composure. She presented evidence that the colonies had been legally established under Council law. She pointed out that millions of humans now lived on those worlds, that they had built homes and families there. She asked the Council to uphold its own rules, to protect its members from aggression. Her speech was eloquent and passionate. The Council voted to take no action. The Crithians were too powerful, too important to the Council's military structure. Humanity was too weak, too new to be worth defending. It was a simple political calculation. Several ambassadors privately apologized to Chen, saying they wished things could be different, but wishes changed nothing. 2 weeks later, the Crithian fleet appeared in orbit above New Providence, one of the disputed colonies. The colonial governor attempted to contact them, to find some peaceful solution. The Crithians responded by opening fire. The orbital bombardment lasted 6 hours. When it was over, New Providence was a burning wasteland. 2 million humans were dead. Men, women, children, all gone in an afternoon of systematic slaughter. The footage reached Earth within hours. People watched in horror as cities burned, as escape ships were shot down, as a world died. Rage and grief spread across human space like wildfire. Protests erupted outside council embassies. Human representatives demanded justice, demanded action, demanded that the council honor its obligations. The council expressed its condolences and did nothing else. Ambassador Vector gave an interview to a galactic news network. He seemed pleased with himself, his mandibles clicking in what passed for a Crithian smile. Humanity needed to learn its place, he said. They are weak. They are insignificant. If they wish to prove otherwise, let them show us this famous human spirit everyone speaks of. Let them come with their toy ships and their primitive weapons. We will be waiting. The interview went viral across the galaxy. Some species expressed sympathy for humanity's loss. Others saw it as an inevitable result of human weakness. A few allies offered quiet support, but made it clear they wouldn't risk war with the Crithians. The consensus was clear. Humanity would have to back down. They had no choice. Earth's government issued a statement 48 hours after the massacre. It was brief and formal. The Crithian Empire had 72 hours to withdraw all military forces from human space, pay reparations for the dead, and submit to council arbitration. If these demands were not met, Earth would consider itself at war with the Crithian Empire. The galaxy's reaction was swift and unanimous. The humans were bluffing. They had to be. Going to war with the Crithians would be suicide. Even humanity's allies urged them to reconsider, to find another way. Crithian military command didn't bother responding to the ultimatum. They considered it beneath their notice. When the 72 hours expired, something unexpected happened. Earth's small defensive fleet began moving. All 20 cruisers left their patrol routes and set course for Crithian space. The orbital stations around Earth went to full alert status. Human colonies activated their defense grids. It looked like humanity was actually going to fight. Council observers scrambled to position monitoring satellites. Military analysts from a dozen species began running simulations. The consensus was that this would be over quickly. The Crithians would crush the human fleet probably within hours. Some analysts gave humanity credit for bravery, for refusing to surrender without a fight. Others saw it as foolish pride that would get more humans killed. Ambassador Chen Wei remained in her office at the council station. She watched the fleet movement reports and allowed herself a small smile. After 30 years of being underestimated, after decades of polite insults and casual dismissals, after watching her people be treated as lesser beings, something was about to change. The galaxy thought it knew humanity. The galaxy thought humans were weak, desperate, and doomed. The galaxy was about to learn how wrong it had been, and by the time the lesson was over, nothing would ever be the same again. The Crithian Third Armada was an impressive sight. 500 warships moving in perfect formation through the darkness of space, each one a masterpiece of military engineering. The smallest vessels were frigate-class ships that could level a city from orbit. The largest were dreadnoughts carrying enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. Admiral Krathzon commanded the armada from his flagship, a vessel so massive it had its own internal gravity systems and carried a crew of 10,000. Krathzon had fought in 17 major battles during his career. He had destroyed pirate fleets, crushed rebellions, and enforced Crithian dominance across multiple sectors. He was not a cruel commander, but he was efficient. When the Empire gave him orders to intercept and destroy the human fleet, he approached the task with professional detachment. It would be over quickly. The humans would realize their mistake and either surrender or die. Either way, the sector would learn that challenging the Crithian Empire led to only one outcome. The meeting point was near Kepler Station, an old mining outpost that marked the border between human and Crithian space. Long-range sensors detected the human fleet approaching from the opposite direction. 20 ships, 20 outdated cruisers against 500 of the Empire's finest warships. Krathzon almost felt sorry for them. All ships, battle formation, he ordered. The armada smoothly transitioned into an attack pattern that had been refined over centuries of warfare. The dreadnoughts formed the center, their heavy shields projecting a nearly impenetrable defensive wall. Cruisers flanked them on both sides, ready to launch plasma barrages. Frigates spread out to prevent any escape. It was textbook strategy and it had never failed. The human fleet continued its approach. They weren't even trying to run. Krathzon found that interesting. Either they were incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Probably both. Open a channel, he said. Give them one chance to surrender. The communications officer worked her console, then frowned. Sir, they're not responding to standard hailing frequencies. Wait, I'm detecting something strange. Their communications are encrypted with a system I don't recognize. I can't break through it. Krathzon dismissed her concern with a wave of his massive claw. It doesn't matter. If they won't surrender, we'll make this quick. All ships prepare to fire on my mark. The human ships were now within weapons range. They still moved in formation, seemingly unconcerned by the overwhelming force arrayed against them. Krathzon raised his arm, ready to give the order that would end this pointless battle. Then the humans opened fire. It wasn't plasma. It wasn't lasers. It wasn't any weapon system the Krithians recognized. Solid metal projectiles accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, crossed the distance between fleets in seconds. The first projectile hit a Krithian cruiser's shields at such velocity that the kinetic energy simply overwhelmed them. The shield generators exploded from the overload. The projectile punched through the hull like it was made of paper, entered from one side and exited the other, leaving a perfectly cylindrical hole 3 meters wide. The ship began venting atmosphere and spinning out of control. What was that? Krathzon roared. Return fire. All ships, return fire. The Krithian fleet unleashed a barrage of plasma that should have vaporized the human ships. But the humans were moving now, really moving with acceleration and maneuverability that shouldn't have been possible for ships of their size. They scattered and weaved through the plasma streams like small fighters, not like cruisers. Their engines burned with an intensity that indicated some kind of drive system Council scientists hadn't encountered before. More railgun projectiles hammered into Krithian ships. The weapons were devastatingly simple in concept but terrifyingly effective. There were no energy signatures to detect before firing, no charge-up time, just solid metal moving at relativistic speeds. The Krithian shields designed to dissipate energy weapons were nearly useless against kinetic impacts of this magnitude. Launch missiles, Krathzon commanded. Saturate the area. Thousands of missiles streaked toward the human fleet. Each one was equipped with advanced tracking systems and powerful warheads. Against most opponents, this tactic was unstoppable. But as the missiles closed on their targets, something remarkable happened. The human ships deployed point defense systems that were impossibly accurate. Small railguns mounted on every surface tracked and destroyed incoming missiles with precision that seemed almost supernatural. Missiles exploded in brilliant cascades of fire, but none reached their targets. How are they doing this? Krathzon's second-in-command stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Those tracking systems would require computational power beyond anything we've built. And the coordination between their ships, it's perfect. There's no communication lag at all. The battle, if it could even be called that, continued for 47 minutes. The human fleet moved through the Krithian formation like predators among prey. They operated in coordinated groups of 4, each group focusing on a single target before moving to the next. Their tactics were nothing like the standard Council doctrine. They didn't trade fire in honorable exchanges. They struck from unexpected angles, retreated when pressed, and always seemed to know where Krithian ships would be before they got there. Krathzon watched his armada die. Ships exploded or went dark, their systems shattered by precisely placed railgun strikes. Some captains tried to surrender, broadcasting distress signals. The humans disabled those ships without destroying them, moving on to those that still fought. It was methodical, efficient, and terrifying. All ships retreat, Krathzon finally ordered, his pride shattered. Full withdrawal. Get us out of here. What remained of the Third Armada, about 150 ships, broke formation and ran. The humans let them go. They simply stopped firing and watched the Krithian vessels flee into hyperspace. Then, as if nothing unusual had happened, the human fleet reformed and began returning to their patrol routes. Krathzon sat in his command chair, his hands shaking slightly. In 47 minutes, he had lost 350 warships. The humans had lost nothing, not a single ship destroyed. A few showed minor damage, carbon scoring on their hulls from plasma that had actually managed to hit them, but nothing serious. His crews were dead or captured. His reputation was destroyed, and he had no idea how it had happened. The battle footage spread across the galaxy within hours. Council Military Command watched in stunned silence as the engagement replayed on their screens. Analysts ran the data through their computers again and again, unable to believe the results. The humans had achieved perfect tactical coordination across 20 ships. Their reaction times were faster than biological crews should be capable of. Their weapons technology was decades, maybe centuries, ahead of anything in Council arsenals. Questions erupted across diplomatic channels. How had humanity developed such technology in secret? Where had they obtained these weapons? Why had they hidden their capabilities for 50 years? The humans offered no explanations. Their diplomats simply referred all questions to Earth's military command, which remained completely silent. The Crithian High Command convened an emergency session. The loss of the Third Armada was a disaster, but more than that, it was an insult. The Empire's pride had been wounded. Worse, other species were watching. If the Crithians backed down now, they would look weak. And weakness in galactic politics invited challenges from enemies. High Commander Zargoth addressed the assembly with cold fury in his voice. We underestimated them. We won't make that mistake twice. The Empire's full battle fleet will mobilize. 3,000 ships. We will crush Earth itself. We will show the galaxy what happens to those who challenge Crithian power. The vote was unanimous. The Empire would go to war with humanity. Total war. With the full weight of their military might. Allies were called upon to honor their treaties. Resources were redirected to the war effort. The largest military mobilization in Crithian history began. Earth's response came through official channels 24 hours later. Secretary General Amara Okonkwo appeared on every major broadcast network in the galaxy. She was a small woman, barely 5.5 feet tall with gray hair and kind eyes. She looked like someone's grandmother. She spoke in a calm, measured tone. People of the Galactic Council, we ask you one more time to choose peace. The Crithian Empire has already lost hundreds of ships and thousands of lives. This can end now with diplomacy. But if the Empire continues down this path, if they bring their full fleet against us, they will learn a truth that humanity has known for thousands of years. They will learn that some battles cannot be won, no matter how many ships you bring. She paused, her expression hardening. You have no idea who you're threatening. Stand down. The Crithians interpreted the message as desperation, a last plea from a species that knew it was doomed. Their fleet continued to gather. Within a week, 3,000 warships assembled in Crithian space, the largest battle fleet ever deployed in Council history. They set course for Earth, ready to deliver the final blow to humanity's foolish resistance. The galaxy watched and waited for the inevitable human defeat. The first person to notice something was wrong was a Valorian sensor technician named Tilrak. She worked at a Council observation post in neutral space, monitoring traffic and keeping records of ship movements. It was boring work, but it paid well and she was good at it. She knew the patterns of every major shipping lane, every regular patrol route, every normal fluctuation in the sensor net. So when anomalies started appearing across multiple sectors of human space, she noticed immediately. Small things at first. An asteroid in the belt around Ross 128 was moving, just slightly, in a way that didn't match any natural orbit. A moon around a gas giant in the Tau Ceti system showed a power signature for exactly 3 seconds before going dark again. Ice chunks in the Kuiper belt adjusted their trajectories by fractions of a degree. That's strange, she muttered, pulling up historical data. The asteroid in question had been in the same stable orbit for 40 years, according to records. It shouldn't be moving at all. She checked the moon next. According to surveys, it was a dead rock with no geological activity. It shouldn't have any power signature. Tilrak filed her report and thought nothing more of it. She assumed there was some explanation. Probably something mundane. But across dozens of observation posts, other technicians were filing similar reports. Anomalies in human space. Objects that shouldn't be moving. Power readings from places that should be dead. One by one, these reports climbed up the chain of command. Admiral Zhen Liang of Earth's Solar Defense Force stood on the bridge of the UESS Thermopylae, a ship that officially didn't exist. Around him, dozens of officers worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. They had been training for this moment for 40 years. Every simulation, every drill, every exercise had been leading to this day. Status report, Zhen said calmly. All units responding to activation codes, his operations officer reported. Stealth systems disengaging on schedule. Weapons coming online. Power plants reaching full output. Sir, we're getting confirmation from all sectors. The fleet is waking up. Good. Proceed with Phase 2. Across human space, what the galaxy had thought were asteroids began to transform. Outer layers of rock and ice split apart and fell away, revealing the warships hidden beneath. They had been there for decades, disguised so perfectly that even close-range scans had never penetrated the deception. Human engineers had hollowed out real asteroids and built ships inside them, ships that could wait in silence for years if necessary. The gas giants that humanity had colonized turned out to be more than just mining operations. Saturn's moon Titan, which everyone knew housed some human research facilities, opened up to reveal the largest shipyard complex in known space. Massive dock structures rose from beneath artificial craters. Ships that had been under construction in hidden bays began moving out into open space. The production capacity was staggering, something no one had suspected was possible. In the Kuiper Belt, thousands of ice chunks that had been there since the solar system formed suddenly weren't ice anymore. They were weapons platforms, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a cruiser. They had been placed there by automated systems, hidden among the billions of real objects that drifted in the outer dark. Council observers watched their sensors with growing horror as the true scope of what they were seeing became clear. One station commander in the Centauri sector pulled up his records, hands shaking. These asteroids, these moons, they've been here the whole time. We surveyed them. We mapped them. How did we miss this? Because they wanted us to miss it, his subordinate whispered. They've been building this for decades right under our sensors and we never knew. The numbers kept climbing. 1,000 ships revealed. 2,000. 5,000. The analysts who had laughed at humanity's 20-ship fleet stared at their displays in disbelief. By the time the activation was complete, humanity's true military force became clear. 10,000 warships, every one of them comparable to or better than the vessels that had destroyed the Crithian Third Armada. But it wasn't just the ships. As the galaxy's military intelligence agencies scrambled to understand what they were seeing, other secrets emerged. Documents began circulating through back channels, carefully leaked by anonymous sources. Technical specifications, historical records, strategic analyses. Someone inside the human government wanted the galaxy to know the truth. Humanity had been preparing since first contact. When human explorers first encountered the Council 50 years ago, their leaders had done something that seemed very human in retrospect. They had studied. They had read every historical record they could access. They had analyzed every war, every conflict, every military engagement in 10,000 years of galactic history. They had looked for patterns and they had found one. The Council species were powerful, but they were predictable. They built massive ships and relied on overwhelming force. They broadcasted their strength because they believed that strength alone would deter aggression. They fought according to doctrines that had barely changed in centuries. They were like heavyweight boxers, powerful but slow, committed to trading blows until someone fell. Humanity had chosen a different path. If the Council species were boxers, humans would be something else entirely. They would be faster, more agile, more unpredictable. They would use technology the Council hadn't developed because they'd never needed to. They would coordinate their forces in ways that seemed impossible. And most importantly, they would hide their true capabilities until the moment they were needed. Let them think we're weak, the documents revealed in a quote from Earth's first Secretary of Defense. Let them dismiss us. Let them make jokes about our primitive ships and our soft bodies. While they laugh, we'll be building. While they underestimate us, we'll be preparing. And when the time comes, when someone finally pushes us too far, they'll learn what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. The strategy had worked perfectly. For 50 years, humanity had maintained the illusion of technological inferiority. They had used old ships for patrols, hidden their advanced vessels in plain sight, and carefully managed what information they shared. Their diplomats had advocated for peace not because they were weak, but because they genuinely preferred peace. But they had never been helpless. The Crithian battle fleet was already in transit when the news reached them. High Commander Zargoth read the intelligence reports in his ready room, his hands clenching and unclenching with barely controlled rage. 10,000 ships. How had they missed 10,000 ships? His tactical officer appeared on the view screen. Sir, we're receiving recommendations from Council Military Command. They're suggesting we abort the attack and return to Crithian space. The odds have changed significantly. Abort? Zargoth's voice dripped with contempt. We still outnumber them 3-1. Our ships are larger. Our crew's more experienced. These humans got lucky against one armada. They won't be so lucky against our entire fleet. Sir, the analysts believe— I don't care what the analysts believe. Zargoth roared. The Empire does not run from prey no matter how many teeth they bear. We continue to Earth. We will crush this fleet they've revealed. We will burn their homeworld. And we will show the galaxy that the Crithian Empire does not accept defeat. The tactical officer nodded, though his expression suggested he disagreed with the decision. As you command, sir. The Crithian fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system 24 hours later. 3,000 warships, arrayed in a formation that had conquered dozens of systems, appeared in the darkness between the stars. They began their approach to Earth, engines burning bright, weapons charging, shields at maximum. High Commander Zargoth stood on the bridge of his flagship, surveying the fleet with satisfaction. Whatever tricks the humans had used before, whatever surprises they had prepared, it wouldn't be enough. The Empire's might was unstoppable. Then his sensor officer spoke, her voice cracking with fear. Sir, we're detecting multiple contacts. Thousands of them. They're all around us. The tactical display lit up like a city at night. In every direction, human warships appeared. They had been waiting in the outer system, positioned perfectly to surround the Crithian fleet. The asteroids hadn't just been hiding ships near Earth. They had been everywhere throughout human space, waiting for exactly this moment. 10,000 human warships formed a sphere around the Crithian fleet. Every weapon was trained on the invaders. Every ship was ready to fire. Zargoth stared at the display, finally understanding the trap they had walked into. The humans hadn't been desperate. They hadn't been lucky. They had been patient. And now the Crithians were the ones who were surrounded, outnumbered, and outgunned in enemy territory. A transmission came through on all frequencies. It was Secretary General Okonkwo again, her face appearing on every screen in every ship. Her expression was sad but determined. High Commander Zargoth, you wanted to see our fleet. Here it is. You are surrounded. Your ships are outmatched. Your crews are far from home. This is your last chance to surrender. Stand down now and you'll be treated with honor. Continue fighting, and you'll learn why humanity spent 50 years preparing for a war we hoped would never come. She paused. Choose wisely. You have 5 minutes. High Commander Zargoth stared at the tactical display for the full 5 minutes, watching the seconds count down. Every instinct he had screamed at him to surrender. He was a military commander, not a fool. The tactical situation was impossible. His fleet was surrounded, outgunned, and trapped. Any competent officer would recognize this and save their crews. But Zargoth was also Crithian. His people had built an empire on the principle that strength must never bow. Surrender was not just defeat, it was dishonor. If he gave up without fighting, he would be remembered as the commander who broke 1,000 years of Crithian military pride. His name would be cursed. His family would be shamed. All ships, he said quietly. Prepare for battle. We die with honor. The timer reached 0. What happened next was not really a battle. It was a demonstration. The human fleet opened fire with such precise coordination that it seemed like a single organism rather than 10,000 separate ships. The targeting was surgical. Human railguns didn't aim for kill shots. They aimed for engine blocks, weapon systems, shield generators, and communication arrays. They systematically disabled Crithian ships without destroying them. The Crithians fought back with everything they had. Plasma cannons fired in desperate barrages. Missiles launched by the thousands. Energy weapons cut through the darkness. But the human point defense systems were even more effective than they had been at Kepler Station. Missiles exploded before reaching their targets. Plasma dispersed against defensive fields that somehow redirected energy better than traditional shields. One Crithian cruiser captain tried ramming a human vessel, pushing his engines to maximum in a desperate suicide attack. The human ship simply moved out of the way at the last second with acceleration that should have turned its crew to paste. The Crithian cruiser tumbled past and 3 railgun shots disabled it a moment later. Throughout the battle, the humans broadcast continuous surrender requests. Stand down. Power down your weapons. You don't have to die today. The messages came in Crithian language, perfectly translated, almost pleading. Some Crithian crews listened. Their ships went dark, their captains choosing survival over honor. The human fleet carefully tagged each surrendered vessel and left them alone. but others kept fighting. The flagship was one of them. Zargoth refused every surrender request, directing his crew to fight until their last breath. The massive dreadnought's shields absorbed dozens of railgun strikes, its thick armor holding against the assault. For a moment it seemed the flagship might actually survive. Then Admiral Zhenliang made a decision. Target flagship reactor containment only. Authorization Gen Alpha 77. A different kind of weapon fired, something the Crithians hadn't seen before. An electromagnetic pulse, shaped and directed with impossible precision, struck the flagship's reactor chamber. The containment fields flickered for exactly 2 seconds, long enough for the reactor to begin an emergency shutdown, not long enough to cause an explosion. The flagship went completely dark, floating dead in space. "Boarding teams move in," Jen ordered. "Capture the High Commander alive if possible." Human assault shuttles, small and fast, swarmed the disabled flagship. They cut through the outer hull with precision tools and entered the ship. Inside, Crithian warriors tried to resist, but they were fighting in the dark with no power and no coordination. The human soldiers used non-lethal weapons, stunning rather than killing. They moved through the ship with night vision and perfect tactical awareness. Overwhelming resistance through speed and surprise. They found Zargoth on the bridge, standing in the darkness, refusing to sit even in defeat. When the human soldiers entered with their weapons raised, he simply stood there waiting. The team leader, a young lieutenant named Marcus Webb, approached cautiously. "High Commander Zargoth," Webb said in careful Crithian, "I'm placing you under arrest. You and your crew will be treated according to the rules of war. Will you come peacefully?" Zargoth looked at the human soldier, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. Not a weak creature, not primitive prey. A professional warrior who had just executed a flawless military operation. The High Commander straightened his posture and inclined his head slightly. "I will not resist," he said. "Tell your admiral he has won." The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 6 hours. At the end, 3,000 Crithian warships were floating in space, disabled but not destroyed. Casualties were surprisingly light. The humans had been careful, precise, almost gentle in their application of overwhelming force. Of the 3,000 Crithian ships, only 73 had been completely destroyed. Most of them because their crews had chosen to self-destruct rather than surrender. The human fleet had lost 0 ships. 0. Some vessels showed damage, carbon scoring and dented armor where lucky shots had penetrated their defenses, but nothing serious. Nothing that couldn't be repaired in a few days at dock. As the last Crithian vessels powered down their weapons, humanity did something that shocked the galaxy. They broadcast everything. Every moment of the battle, from every angle, in perfect high-definition clarity. The footage was sent to every major news network, every government, every military command center and council space. But they didn't just send the battle footage. They sent files. Thousands of documents meticulously organized and indexed. Historical records going back 50 years. Every time humanity had warned the Council about aggressive species and been ignored. Every complaint filed about territorial violations. Every request for protection that had been denied. Evidence of Crithian war crimes dating back decades. Attacks on civilian populations. Destruction of colony ships. Treaties violated. Innocent species crushed under the Empire's expansion. Most damning of all were the Council's own internal communications, somehow obtained by human intelligence. Messages between Council members discussing the Crithian violations and agreeing to do nothing because the Empire was too powerful to challenge. "You let them do this." Secretary General Okonkwo's voice accompanied the document dump. "You knew the Crithians were monsters and you did nothing. You knew they would eventually attack someone who couldn't defend themselves and you looked the other way. The Council talks about justice and peace, but you only enforce those principles when it's convenient. When it's safe," the broadcast continued. "We tried your way. We followed your rules. We appealed to your institutions. And when we needed you, when our people were dying, you abandoned us. So now we're offering a new deal." The terms appeared on screens across the galaxy. The Crithian Empire would be dismantled. The species they had conquered would be granted independence. The High Command would face trial for war crimes. The Empire would pay reparations to humanity for New Providence and to every other species they had victimized. But that was just the beginning. Humanity demanded a seat on the Council Security Directorate with full veto power. They demanded reform of Council military doctrine to prioritize protection of member species over political convenience. They demanded that any Council member could appeal to humanity for protection if the Council refused to act. And then came the threat, delivered in Okonkwo's calm, measured voice. If you don't agree to these terms, we will share our technology. All of it. Every weapon system, every engine design, every tactical doctrine we've developed. We'll give it freely to every species that's been oppressed, every colony that's been threatened, every minor power that's been ignored. We'll arm them and train them. And your precious council, with its 10,000 years of stability, will collapse into chaos within a generation. The galaxy reacted with immediate panic. The council chamber erupted into shouting matches. Ambassadors from major powers screamed about human arrogance. Smaller species cheered. Military commands ran scenarios and realized the humans weren't bluffing. If humanity shared their technology with even a fraction of the oppressed species in the galaxy, the balance of power would shatter completely. Secret communications began within hours. Minor species reached out to human diplomats quietly, asking if the offer was real. Could they really receive protection? Could they really defend themselves? The humans responded with careful promises. Yes, the offer was real. Yes, humanity would help. But only if the council rejected the terms. The council convened an emergency session. The debate raged for 3 days. Hardliners argued that giving in would set a terrible precedent. Pragmatists pointed out that refusing would be worse. Some species threatened to leave the council entirely. Others proposed compromise terms. In the end, reality won. The council couldn't risk galactic chaos. They couldn't risk every minor species suddenly having weapons that could threaten established powers. They couldn't risk war spreading across hundreds of systems. The vote was close, but it passed. The council accepted humanity's terms. 5 years later, Ambassador Chen Wei stood in the reformed council chamber and watched as the Krithian territories officially became independent nations. 43 species that had lived under imperial rule for generations now had their own governments, their own representatives, their own voices. The council had changed. Not perfectly, not completely, but meaningfully. There were new rules about intervention, new protections for member species, new accountability for military actions. The prisoner transfer ceremony took place on a neutral space station, orbiting a dead world halfway between Earth and the former Krithian core territories. It was a symbolic location, chosen carefully by diplomats from both sides. High Commander Zargoth and 400 of his senior officers were being released after serving 2 years in human custody. Captain Elena Rodriguez of Earth's diplomatic security force stood at attention as the Krithian prisoners filed past. They looked different than they had 2 years ago. Still massive, still imposing, but something in their bearing had changed. They moved with less arrogance, more awareness. Prison had not broken them, but it had taught them something. Zargoth was the last to leave. He paused in front of Rodriguez, studying her with those alien eyes that had once looked at humans with such contempt. She met his gaze steadily. "Your people treated us fairly," Zargoth said in heavily accented English. He had learned the language during his imprisonment. "Better than we treated yours at New Providence." "I still don't understand why." Rodriguez considered her answer carefully. "Because we're not trying to be monsters. We're trying to be better than that, even to our enemies." "Then you are either very wise or very foolish," Zargoth replied. "Perhaps both." He straightened to his full height and gave her a formal Krithian salute, fist to chest. "I hope we never meet in battle again, Captain. But if we do, I will remember this day." She returned the salute, human style. "So will I, Commander." Back on Earth, Secretary General Okonkwo stood before the United Nations General Assembly, addressing not just the representatives in the room, but the entire human population watching from across dozens of star systems. It had been 5 years since the Battle of Sol. 5 years since humanity revealed its hidden fleet and changed the galactic order. She was giving her final address before stepping down from office. "We did what we had to do," she said, her voice carrying across billions of screens and speakers. "We prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. When the worst came, we were ready, but now we face a different challenge. How do we use our strength? What kind of power do we want to be?" She gestured to the screens behind her, showing images of human ships patrolling trade routes, protecting cargo vessels from pirates, human engineers helping former Krithian colonies rebuild their infrastructure, human doctors providing medical aid to species that had never had access to advanced healthcare, human teachers sharing knowledge and technology. "We could have conquered," Okonkwo continued. "When we revealed our fleet, We had the power to dominate the galaxy. We could have imposed our will on every species we encountered. We could have become exactly what we fought against. But we chose differently. We chose to protect rather than dominate, to share rather than hoard, to lift others up rather than push them down. In the audience, young Lieutenant Marcus Webb listened carefully. He had been one of the first soldiers to board Zargoth's flagship, and the experience had changed him. He had seen the fear in the Crethean crew's eyes, the same fear humans had felt when they were the weak ones. It had taught him something important about power and responsibility. After the speech, he found himself at a recruitment center in New York, talking to applicants for the Solar Defense Force. The military had expanded enormously over the past 5 years, but the selection standards remained incredibly high. A young woman sat across from him, eager and nervous. "Why do you want to serve?" Webb asked her. "To protect people," she answered immediately. "Any people, not just humans. Everyone who needs help." Webb nodded approvingly. That was the right answer. That was the only answer they wanted to hear anymore. Across the galaxy, the changes continued to ripple outward. The Valorian Confederacy, once barely able to defend itself from raiders, now fielded a small but effective fleet equipped with human technology. Earth had shared defensive systems, nothing that could threaten established powers, but enough to ensure smaller species could protect themselves. The gift came with training and one strict condition. The technology could only be used for defense, never aggression. The Crethean species itself had fractured after the war. Some systems embraced the reforms, establishing democratic governments and focusing on peaceful development. Others clung to the old imperial ways, bitter and resentful. But even the bitter ones had learned to be cautious. The galaxy's balance of power had shifted permanently. On a space station in the Centauri sector, a class of mixed-species military cadets gathered for their tactics lecture. The instructor was a veteran Crethean officer named Velkara, who had fought at the Battle of Sol and survived. She had joined the New Council Defense Initiative, a multinational military force created after the reforms. "Today we study the Battle of Sol," she announced, bringing up a tactical display. The students, representing a dozen different species, leaned forward with interest. Everyone knew this battle. Everyone had studied it. But learning from someone who had been there was different. The humans won before the battle even started, Velkara explained. They won through patience, planning, and understanding their enemy. They knew we would underestimate them. They knew we would rely on our traditional advantages. They spent 50 years studying our weaknesses while we never bothered to learn about their strengths. A young human cadet raised her hand. "But didn't we win because of better technology? The railguns, the computers, the engines?" "Technology helps," Velkara agreed. "But it's not everything. We had technology. We had powerful ships and weapons. What we lacked was adaptability. We fought the way we had always fought because it had always worked before. The humans fought in ways we couldn't predict because they studied us and we didn't study them. That's the lesson. Never assume you know everything about your opponent. Never stop learning. Never stop adapting." In a quiet laboratory on Mars, Dr. Sarah Chen worked on the next generation of human ship technology. She was part of a team that had developed the railgun systems that had changed galactic warfare. But her current project was something different, something she hoped would never need to be used. Her colleague, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, looked over the schematics with concern.
"Are you sure about this?"
"If we keep developing new weapons, we're just starting an arms race." Sarah nodded slowly. "I know. But the galaxy needs to understand something. We revealed one hidden fleet. That doesn't mean we've revealed everything. As long as potential enemies believe we might have more surprises waiting, they'll think twice before attacking anyone under our protection. So we're building a deterrent?" "We're building insurance," Sarah corrected. "The best way to avoid war is to make the cost too high for anyone to consider it. That's what we did with the Sol Defense Network. That's what we'll continue to do. Not because we want to use these weapons, but because we never want to need them. On Earth, in the Australian outback, children played in a schoolyard under a bright sky. Some were human. Others were young aliens whose families had immigrated to Earth after the war. They laughed and played together, unaware of the political complexities that had brought them to this moment. They just knew they were friends. A Valorian child named Kira ran past, chased by 2 human boys in a game of tag. She was faster than they were, her species naturally more athletic, but they were better at strategy, coordinating to corner her near the playground equipment. She laughed as they caught her, then declared herself it, and began chasing them in turn. Their teacher, an elderly man named Mr. Okafor, watched them with a smile. He had lived through the dark days of the Crithian attack, had lost friends at New Providence. He had seen humanity go from victim to protector, and now he watched the next generation growing up in a galaxy that was slowly, painfully becoming better. 5 years after the Battle of Sol, Ambassador Chen Wei received a visitor at her office on the Council Station. It was a young Crithian diplomat named Teklar, representing one of the reformed democratic systems. He seemed nervous. "Ambassador Chen," he began formally, "I wanted to thank you. My homeworld was an imperial colony. We lived under military occupation for 3 generations. When your fleet defeated the Empire, you gave us a choice, freedom or continued subjugation. We chose freedom. My people are building a new society now, one based on law and consent rather than force. This would not have been possible without humanity's intervention." Chen smiled warmly. "You're welcome. But remember, we didn't give you freedom. We gave you the opportunity to choose it. Your people did the hard work of building something new. That's all you." After he left, Chen stood at the window of her office looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the hidden weapons platforms waited in the darkness. Somewhere in deep space, human research teams continued developing technology that other species couldn't imagine. Somewhere, contingency plans were being updated for threats that might never emerge. The galaxy thought it knew humanity's strength now. They had seen the 10,000 ships, seen the railguns and the coordinated tactics. They had seen humans protect the weak and punish the aggressive. They believed they understood the new galactic order, but Chen knew better. She had sat in on classified briefings. She had seen reports that would never be declassified in her lifetime. The Sol Defense Network was impressive, but it wasn't everything.